Starting something new is always the hardest thing for a lot of people, and it's easy to see why. We're uncertain about the true nature of things. We feel like we're taking a massive risk by attempting this new thing. And there is so much uncertainty, unpredictability, and mystery surrounding all of this attempt that it's easy to see why we would hesitate and doubt ourselves and be skeptical of ourselves from time to time. But what if we could change all of that? What if instead of being concerned or hesitating about whether something is a good idea, we felt more excited about a new venture forward and have some distinct advantages that we can use to put us further ahead of the game? What if we could just be better beginners to everything that we started? As far-fetched as that may sound, it's actually possible for us to be simply better beginners. And it all begins with an article that I read from Alice Boyes, a former clinical psychologist who has now become a writer and author who talks about how we can help with improving our anxiety around relationships and just everyday living. And combined with my own understanding and experiences of habit building, this overall system can ensure that we can get the most from starting something new. And it is crucial for us to do so, as we can only be a beginner once. So let's talk about how we can just be better beginners. The first one that she encourages is to really get ourselves out there and to not be invisible, especially in the case of making mistakes. It's understandable why we feel like we shouldn't be rocking the boat and trying to keep ourselves more reserved when starting out. Making mistakes feels like we're risking getting dogpiled or putting unnecessary pressure on ourselves or give up. So it just feels generally safer for us to kind of keep to ourselves and do our own thing while we're trying to establish ourselves. I can certainly understand that sort of sentiment, as when I first started writing, I too was very reserved in my own beginnings, and I didn't really want to be pushing myself out there and out of worry that I would say something that people wouldn't really agree with, or I would say something wrong or misleading. But that way of thinking overall is simply a trap.
It's a trap!
Because much like with my early writing experiences that I went through, growing in isolation and trying to not keep the spotlight on yourself so much kind of misses the whole point of growing and improving yourself and breaking into an industry and establishing yourself. If you try growing in isolation, the progress that you're going to be making is so much slower, and it often goes unnoticed. I found that immediately when I started writing a book, and under the idea that writing and publishing a book is a generally good idea because it's just one good way to build up revenue for yourself. So when I tried to get around to promoting it, because the fact that I was growing in isolation and was a relatively obscure individual, and still am, the book didn't really get that much traction at all, and I didn't make hardly any sales. In fact, I haven't really made that many sales with this book, and I've all since abandoned it entirely. Instead, what I learned much later is that it's better to connect with individuals, and it's so much easier to do that when you're a beginner, and you really should be doing that way more rather than trying to grow yourself in isolation and try to keep to yourself and being conservative in that sense. One good way of doing that is really just getting into the mindset that you want to be standing out more and you want to be presenting yourself some more and pushing your own brand more aggressively without it being obnoxious. The second thing that Boyes encourages is to enjoy the gains from these particular moments and also to preserve the memory of them. The argument for preserving these kinds of moments is that while rapid progress certainly feels good, but as time goes on, we tend to forget what being a beginner feels like to us. We replace the wonder of learning and growing with experience, and with that, we tend to get set in our ways. This can be good in some cases because it keeps messaging very consistent and clear, but it can also repress anything new from being introduced and changing ourselves and adapting to the industry and changing with the times. And so reminding ourselves of what it's like to be a beginner can help us maintain that sort of flexibility and curiosity that some of us still hold on to. Even though it's not as important right now as you're starting something brand new, it will be important to do so later on, and it's just something that you want to be keeping in mind right now.
I understand.
A simple way of preserving the memory is to really hold on to the feelings that you're experiencing right at this moment and recalling them and having stories that you can share with other people in a similar way to what I've been talking about with my own writing experiences and my writing adventure. So really any kind of method that can help with recalling your roots and reminding yourself of those feelings can be very helpful, especially as you go on in the years and develop this habit or build a business or whatever. The third is to leverage the aforementioned resources that are aimed specifically at beginners, beyond business grants and business loans that can help with speeding up the construction of a business. Things like online content, programs, and groups can also provide an easy way to feed into that curiosity and develop habits and breaking into these kinds of new industries for you. It's overwhelming, but like with finding the right guru for you, it's important that you don't just stick to one particular source and go nowhere else. Leveraging those resources means branching out and getting messy and figuring out what is the best path for you to take. You want to be learning new skills, even if learning can be frustrating or nerve-wracking.
I'm nervous. What if I hit her?
A lot of people push to trying to be as efficient as possible, especially when starting out, and that's honestly not really the point to being a beginner, let alone growing properly. And also, speaking of learning, this is also stressed in our fourth tip. Despite us being new to something, we're not new to learning in general. What this means is knowing how you learn and process information is just as important as the material itself. This is especially so outside of our own education system, which normally encourages us to memorize specific details and extract information from that. As I talked about in a previous video with self-help books, there are several learning barriers that we have to overcome and that our own pre-existing education systems just don't really handle all that well. And so finding ways to overcome that on our own is so much better for us. And one of the best ways to do that is learning about learning and engaging with learning enthusiastically and with genuine interest and curiosity will just make us better beginners overall.
Whoa, Mondo cool.
That's right, boys. Mondo cool.
Connecting information to things that we can relate to, studying with other people, and talking out what you're learning can make sure that you're getting the fundamentals and also reinforce information in a more natural way than any education system could do. The final tip that Boys recommends is that we should try to be filtering who we're learning things from. Even though it's contradictory to the previous tip that I just talked about, where you want to be gathering up as much information, the difference is that as a beginner, you want to be casting a wide net before starting to narrow things down and focus on the people that are really delivering on your expectations and are helping you grow.
But what does that have to do with it?
No. He's got a point.
When it comes to information, there's obviously a ton of it. And it's really difficult to parse between what is actually helpful for you and what isn't. And this particular tip that Boys is talking about is just a way for us to be filtering down and narrowing down that list. And essentially the criteria for filtering that is simply low quality learning. What she means by this is simply looking after information that is actually helping you with retaining that information rather than keeping you entertained or passively learning.
Are you not entertained?
While I agree with the overall sentiment that learning should be fun and engaging, it's also important to recognize that learning is also meant to be challenging in of itself. And so you want to be really be spending time with people that are actually pushing you along and not necessarily just focusing on how easy something is or how simple it's supposed to be, and is actually getting you to be engaging with the topic with more enthusiasm and interest and curiosity. Aside from the things that Boyce has been talking about in her article, some other things that I think that can help with refining the beginner experience and getting the most out of it are some of the following. The first is to be harnessing self-reflection and discovery. During your downtime, be sure that you spend some time figuring out if this is something that you're genuinely interested in doing and are passionate about. You can also use this to reinforce the things that you're learning as well and to help with recalling and such. Another way is to make this journey all about you. It's a little narcissistic, but being more deliberate about making this journey all about you and your own experiences can be a way to find reasons to engage and find excitement in what you're doing. You want to be attaching personal values and personal goals with the things that you're trying to develop, and whether it's a habit or starting a business. This also means that on the onset that you're learning and being involved in whatever you're doing is a decision that you genuinely have made and isn't being pressured by other people. Another really important thing is, again, to remind yourself to take your time with being a beginner. Again, we can only be a beginner once, and so we can't really replicate that exact same feeling after we've already experienced it. So trying to rush ahead and try to be as efficient as possible and trying to make the most out of it and min-maxing the crap out of it just doesn't really help all that much when it comes to that kind of mentality. And so just reminding yourself to really take your time and slow things down can really help you with just enjoying the beginnings of something new and something exciting for yourself and something that's going to be changing your life and improving it, hopefully. And the last thing is to take your setbacks, mistakes, and failures for really what they are. Opportunities to refine your strategy and to be further invested in what it is that you're doing, or to be more self-reflective and contemplative on these kinds of things. Learning and trying something new is not going to be this flawless thing. You're going to be making mistakes. You're going to fail. You're going to experience setbacks. And so it's important that you're obviously not trying to seek those out deliberately, but to let those experiences come to you and to shape how you actually see them and process them. What should really be different is to be adapting to what those kinds of things are, to what you're experiencing, and make some changes based off of what you're learning from those experiences and from the people around you. Being a beginner is something that we can only experience once. However, these kinds of rules and principles that I've been talking about and that Boyce was talking about in our article are things that we can all really use regardless of whether we're beginners or veterans at the thing that we're already doing. Speaking from my own experiences, talking about familiar topics with this new perspective and spin has given me a deeper appreciation for the topics that I've been talking about in these videos. And the fact that I'm putting all of these things in video formats as well, it has only really enhanced my experience for learning about these topics as new things have emerged that I was not very familiar with until I started researching some of these topics. But if you're indulging in something new, the big takeaway is that you want this journey to be something that you genuinely want to be going through. And you should also be trying to take it slowly, deliberately. Rushing through that experience can only make you overlook specific details and doesn't really create the best kind of relationship with the industry or the people that we engage with on a regular basis within that industry. So really, if you are starting something new, really savor the moments. Learn as deeply and as thoroughly as you can in whatever it is that you're doing. Be curious. And if you do that, you'll be a much better beginner than any other person that is jumping in and trying to speed run the whole process. Thank you guys so much for watching the entirety of this video. Thank you guys so much for watching the entirety of this video. It would really mean a lot to me if you pressed on the like button and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. I love you guys.